Good afternoon. Brian Schroeder with FasterHouse here. Hey, I wanted to tell you about a real life story of a house that I bought the other day. This is, I think, a really cool story. The house was located in University City, Missouri, just outside of, it's a nice part of town, just outside of Clayton, in the St. Louis metro area. A couple bought this house 40 years ago, and they lived in the house for 1 year, and then they got transferred to Washington, D.C. And they weren't sure if they were going to be in D.C. for just a year or two, or they just didn't know. So they rented the house out, and it just turned out that the couple that they rented the house to ended up living there for almost 40 years, and then they recently moved out. So the couple that lived in Washington, D.C. that owned the house had one tenant in the house for almost 40 years, and they paid the rent on time. Not going to say they took the greatest care of the house, but the couple that was in Washington, D.C., they were established out there. They didn't want the house any longer. They totally moved on to Washington, D.C. So when their tenant moved out, they didn't want to come back and do a major renovation on the house because it needed it. So they just called me up and told me that they wanted to sell the house and see what we could do. So we met over at the house, took a look at it, made them an offer right there on the spot that day. They thought about it for a day, and they called me back the next day, and we got together, wrote up a contract, and they flew back to Washington, D.C. I had the title work done on the house, made sure everything was clear and everything, and closed on it just a few days later. And they were actually able to do their closing from the Washington, D.C. area. So they were only in town for a couple days, and they were able to fly back to D.C. and do their closing from their where they lived. And we bought the house in just a few days. And that house, it turned out, wasn't really sure what to do with it, so I started marketing it, just kind of in the condition it was in, because it was in a really nice part of town, but it needed a lot of work. So, I found a builder that was interested in tearing the house down and building a big brand new house on the lot. So that's the story of a house that I bought recently. I hope that helps.